Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. Free agent frenzy. Day one has come and gone. And as I record this, I don't think that there's going to be any more moves of significance for the Rangers, but a very busy day for Chris Drury, and one that turned out better than I thought it would going in. And a lot of it was expected, generally speaking. Vladislav Gavrikov signs a 7-year deal with the Rangers worth $7 million per season. Now, that AAV is a lot lower than was expected. That looked like it was going to start at 8 million. And clearly Gavrikov wanted to come here. We're going to get into everything, but just to give a short summary. So Gavrikov, 7 years, 49 million overall, which we'll talk about, sort of how I feel about that from a philosophical perspective and what it means now. Staying on the defensive side, Keandre Miller is traded in division to the Carolina Hurricanes. It seemed as if Carolina wanted to offer sheet Keandre Miller. So the trade ends up being kind of commensurate to what an offer sheet would look like, but it really honestly seems like it's better for the Rangers. And it was a sign and trade as well. The Rangers technically signed Keandre Miller to an 8-year contract extension. Only a team, you can only basically re-sign a player to an 8-year contract extension. So we've seen a lot of sign and trades recently. Mitch Marner being the most recent one with Toronto and Vegas, but 8 years, $7.5 million per season for Keandre Miller. Definitely way more than I would have expected. And then coming back is a conditional 2026 first-round pick, and that is either Carolina or Dallas's, and that coming from the Mikko Rantanen trade. And it's top 10 protected. So the conditions are basically that the Rangers will get the better of the two picks. And if one of them goes into the top 10, the Rangers will get the lesser of the two. If somehow both go into the top 10, then it becomes the better of the two in 2027. Let's be honest. It's Carolina and Dallas. They're both not going top 10. You're in a best case scenario, you're probably looking at maybe in the low 20s. If somehow one of them kind of struggles, you figure both are making the playoffs. So again, at best, the mid first round pick, more likely going to be a late first round pick. You're also getting a 2026 second from Carolina as well. And Scott Morrow, a right-handed defenseman from the Carolina Hurricanes who played a little bit this past season, actually played in the playoffs due to injuries by the Hurricanes. He played in that 5-game series, lost Eastern Conference Final to the Florida Panthers. But Scott Morrow, he was considered in a lot of rankings as the #1 Carolina prospect. And they have a pretty good prospect pool. And I think now maybe the only, and the Rangers don't really have the deepest prospect pool currently, but the only one that I think might still be higher is Gabe Perreault. And Morrow, I think, in all likelihood, he is going to be a part of this opening night roster. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of time between now and then. It's not like he's a lock, but getting him is a very key piece. This is someone that does have there is potential with Scott Morrow as well. Rangers signed Will Cuylle to a bridge deal, a 2-year deal worth $3.9 million average annual value. So, I think it would have been great for them to sign Cuylle long-term, but the Rangers, they always seem to be, having cap issues and constraints. And so that prevented them from having any chance of that. And Cuylle was someone that there was thought that maybe he could be an offer sheet candidate due to the Rangers' issues. So considering the situation, not a bad job by Chris Drury, because the Cuylle, the cap hit's extremely reasonable. But again, it's more about kind of kicking the can down the road on Cuylle. I really do think that they like him. And I think that if they could have made it work, they may have tried to go long-term. It is actually the highest cap hit among Rangers forwards as far as those bridge contracts are concerned. I think Pavel Buchnevich was most recently the highest, and now Cuylle has eclipsed that. So, that's something to be said, I guess. But that leaves the Rangers right now with about $2 million of cap space. I'm not expecting a whole lot else to happen. But we'll get back to what the roster looks like at the end here. Let's kind of go through piece by piece. And I want to start with Vladislav Gavrikov. He is going to be very likely Adam Fox's defensive partner on that first pair. Probably not a name, in terms of the contract he got and his status, as far as there was a lot of hype around him as far as going to this free agency, but I'm sure there's a lot of fans that don't really know much about Gavrikov. He was in the division with Columbus. He was drafted by the Blue Jackets in 2015 and spent parts of 4 seasons with Columbus. He actually made his debut with Columbus in the playoffs in 2019. Played a couple of games then when Columbus knocked off Tampa and then lost to Boston. So he actually very briefly was teammates with Artemi Panarin in Columbus, but there's actually more of a Russian connection, and it's with Igor Shesterkin. He was a teammate with Igor Shesterkin before that in the KHL with St. Petersburg. So these things do matter. I have to imagine, that there was that conversation, and as far as Gavrikov wanted to come to the Rangers, and for Shesterkin as well, really encouraging him to do so. But Gavrikov, it seems as if he took less money to come to the Rangers. I think that there were definitely offers that were higher, and he wanted to come to New York. It seems as if the Los Angeles Kings offer to retain him was higher, and again, like that is the good thing. And there's all this talk about, with Drury and some of his handling of players, that players aren't gonna want to come to New York. That's really all a bunch of nonsense. It really is. You could argue as far as how he handled things, but it is a destination, just the way it is. And that helps because look, like Ivan Provorov, which was a ridiculous contract, he re-signed with Columbus, 7 years, $8.5 million cap hit, and Gavrikov is better than Provorov. So Gavrikov's game, while it was good with Columbus, it did improve with the Kings. And this past season, 82 games, which is good as far as durability is concerned. The year before that, 77. He does seem like someone that does stay on the ice. 5 goals, 25 assists, 30 points with a plus 26. And the plus minus, like you got to take a little bit of that with a grain of salt, but he played 23 minutes a night. Like this is someone that year in, year out logs a lot of minutes. He's very good defensively, very good as far as, zone entry and defending zone entry. He is really tough to get by, really good stick, really good range. And seems like it's not as if he is horrendous offensively. That's not his game. And you can see that by the stats, but he can move the puck where need be. There is, he's 6'3", 220. I wouldn't call him an overly physical defense, but all we've seen, like there was a highlight with Connor McDavid in the first round of the playoffs where he was very physical with him. So with Gavrikov, look, there is risk involved here in the fact that, look, the Rangers, who knows where they are headed as far as like success. And, clearly the Rangers were going to try to do well next year. They're not like trying to tank. They just brought in Mike Sullivan. The roster is such they're going to go for it, so to speak. But look, this may not age well. And with Gavrikov, I believe there's a no movement clause through the first 5 years. And then he's more tradable in year 6 and 7. But this is like a buyout proof contract. That is what it is. But at least you get the benefit of the lower cap hit, especially with inflation, with the cap, but with the cap rising too. It's a very reasonable deal. I was ready to come on here and be like, wow, like Gavrikov got 8.5, like maybe 9 million. Like that's like kind of crazy. Keandre Miller ended up getting a bigger contract than Gavrikov. And I understand that Keandre Miller is 4 years or so younger than Gavrikov, but still Gavrikov's the better player, flat out. And really was sort of the hot ticket item available here on July 1st, as far as especially defensemen in free agency. So excited for Adam Fox to finally have a really good partner. Look, him and Ryan Lindgren was a successful pair for a while, right? I don't want to shit on Lindgren, who actually just got a nice contract from the Seattle Kraken. Not sure why they gave him a 4-year deal with $4.5 million, but I'm happy for him because he earned that. Like really, he was a heart and soul player for the Rangers. But this is good for Fox. But what does it mean for the defense now? And I guess I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, but we'll kind of make our transition into the Keandre Miller discussion. But, Gavrikov replaces Miller. The left side of the defense is still not good, right? Because in terms of literal left-handed defensemen, let's just call it that. It's Gavrikov, Carson Soucy, who I would like to trade him if at all possible. I don't think that will happen, but it's what is it, a 3.25 cap hit for Carson Soucy? Yeah, 3.25. Urhel Vakanainen, and then I guess Matthew Robertson. Matthew Robertson, he has a chance to maybe make the roster. I don't think he will, but there's a chance. But that's what you're working with there on the left side. On the right side, it's Fox, Will Borgen, who the Rangers, just last season gave a 5-year contract extension to. So he's going to be here and playing a semi-significant role. Braden Schneider, and now Scott Morrow. So what do they do as far as, Do they maybe move Braden Schneider to the left side? It probably gives you a better top four, but you know, it's a little unideal. And in some ways, it does kind of increase. Like, I like Braden Schneider, but if Scott Morrow ends up developing and becoming good, it does kind of make a Braden Schneider trade a possibility with him being a restricted free agent going into next season, going into 26, 27. Um, so there's always that. I am also looking forward. If you do want to go with Schneider with Borgen, I'm fine with that. It kind of leaves the third pair in a weird spot with some combination of Susi, Vakanainen, Morrow, and again, I guess Matthew Robertson, and also, Zach Jones, and I had mentioned this in a short that Zach Jones was not qualified, so he's a free agent, he's gone. So um, this is what you're kind of working with right now, and I think Morrow kind of has the inside shot at that number 7 spot. But really, what may happen is here's the other thing to consider. Um, like Vakanainen might end up being the number 7 defenseman or Susi, I guess. And Morrow slots him in that third pair right side with either Vakanainen or Susi. It could be Susi with Borgen on the second pair because they were together in Seattle, and the third pair is like Vakanainen and Schneider, which we saw a lot. But I'm very glad they brought Morrow in. And let's kind of move over to the Carolina trade side of things here now. And look, and I still say, though, the defense on the whole, I don't love it. I think I like getting Gavrikov in here. This is like the Rangers' best left side defense they've had probably since Ryan McDonough. So you got to feel pretty good about that, but it's not without its holes as well and question marks. So Keandre Miller is traded to Carolina, and it's sad, but we kind of knew this was going to happen. He was a 2018 first round pick. That worked out, right? Like the fact that you're able to you traded Keandre Miller for more than you got him. And he was really one of the few successful, but I'll call it successful, while disappointing, right? He didn't live up to expectations, but the fact that he became an NHL regular, really right from the start, right? Right when he jumped in that 2021, that weird season, um, he ended up being in the Rangers for 5 years. Is basically a top 4 defenseman the whole way through. I mean, the least he averaged a season was 20 minutes and 36 seconds, and played a lot of playoff games, mainly as Jacob Trouba's defensive partner. Up until last year where it was Will Borgen. But, a lot of inconsistencies. We talked again where it got to a point with Miller where it's like, hey, this guy kind of is what he is as far as the skill set's there, but it's between the ears with Keandre. And it was very frustrating as far as a lot of the mistakes he'd make in critical situations. And I feel like with him, sometimes I felt like his head wasn't fully in it in terms of intensity. He's a big body, but didn't really use it, as far as physicality was concerned. And it felt like he regressed. It felt like in the Peter Laviolette era, he regressed. Whereas under Gerard Gallant, those years were more fruitful for Keandre. And yeah, I feel like the last couple of years just left a lot to be desired. He put up 43 points in 79 games in 2023 with really getting pretty minimal power play time, at most just, bits and pieces on the second power play unit. But Keandre has gone, as far as just from nostalgia, really the best Keandre moment was really game 7 against the Penguins in 2022, where he intercepts a puck in the Rangers zone and springs for a potential breakaway. He gets hooked and it leads to the power play where Artemi Panarin wins it. And it just sucks because there was a time where Keandre Miller, there was so much excitement. And look, there is a very decent chance that he will be pretty damn successful with Carolina, just because, look, you got to respect what they bring to the table. And look, Carolina has been a joke in terms of not, with no success as far as the Eastern Conference Final and beyond. But this is a consistent playoff team that has a specific system that works, especially in the regular season. And so Keandre doing well, you can't be shocked by that. I still think that contract is really rich, even with the cap rising. But they must like him a lot for sure. And an in-division trade, it's very interesting. It's very reminiscent to the Brady Shea deal about 5 years ago. And for that was, I believe, Brady Shea for a first-round pick, which actually turned into Braden Schneider, interestingly enough. So that kind of did work out for the Rangers. But Brady Shea was good for Carolina. He last season signed a big deal with the Nashville Predators. But in order for him to sign that big deal, he had to have some success with Carolina. And Brady Shea kind of made his presence felt pretty quickly against the Rangers with a big hit on Jesper Fast in the bubble. Because you got to remember, there was that they traded him, then there was COVID, and they come back with the bubble tournament, and Shea basically knocked out Jesper Fast, and that was the end of Fast as a Ranger. And then he became a Carolina Hurricane, ironically. But so it's not that we haven't seen this before, but the Rangers' return is richer. And let's talk about that return. Conditional first round pick, like I said, this coming draft, 2026, either Carolina's or Dallas's, top 10 protected. So chances are it's going to be in the 20s. And it's the better of the two, right? So hopefully somehow, like sign me up. If that ends up being like number 20, even sign me up for sure. And what should be a pretty deep draft. And then as well, you're getting Carolina's second round pick next year too. So that's the thing. Carolina gave up, some pretty high quality draft capital in 2026, and it recoups to the Rangers because the Rangers had lost a lot of draft capital. Now they've got it back. That's how that works sometimes. And, but getting Scott Morrow, I think, is the biggest part of this because these draft picks, well, let's be honest, like most of the time they don't pan out, especially like in that part of the draft. It's not like this is a top 10 pick. And even then for the Rangers, those have been unsuccessful as we've seen, but for Morrow, he was a second round pick by Carolina in 2021. And he played collegiate. Let's see. He's at UMass and put up pretty good numbers at UMass. I mean, it definitely showing offensive ability as far as the points, 33 points in 37 games, 31 and 35, 30 and 37. And then cup of coffee in 24, 2 games with Carolina in the regular season. And this past season, pretty good numbers in AHL with the Chicago Wolves, 52 games, 39 points. And then in the regular season with Carolina, 14 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points, a +4. Pretty good considering he's more on a limited role. 6 points in 14 games, not bad. Did struggle in the playoffs in that series against Florida in the 5 games he played. They were kind of forced into using him. Florida's a really good team. Like, I'm not going to hold that against Scott Morrow. But this is like what the Rangers needed to get someone. Like when you look at that defense, like pipeline wise, it is non-existent. Truly, like there is nothing there. And on the NHL roster, it wasn't great. So to bring him in and right side defensemen, they don't grow on trees. Even though the Rangers have been successful on the right side, more so than the left, they don't come easy. And like Jackson Dorrington, who I believe he's a left shot defenseman. Like, there's from the JT Miller trade, maybe he becomes something, but like that's literally all we were talking about in terms of anyone like at the Hartford level coming up that like could be a future like player for the Rangers. Like Matthew Robertson, I'm not even going to count him. Like he's someone that is somehow still in the organization and really maybe if the stars align, he could end up playing a role with the NHL club, but I still think he's likely to be in Hartford. But Scott Morrow, if you projected it out, I think that he might make the team. He will probably, you're not going to healthy scratch him. So, he'd probably be on the third pair and he actually might get second power play minutes. You look at who's on this roster. Maybe Braden Schneider, possibly, but like we haven't seen much of that. So there's opportunity there. And again, he is fairly highly touted. Like it's very early on. It may amount to nothing. Carolina's a pretty smart team. So I think, although this trade is a little bit confusing for me from their end. So like the fact that they dealt him, like they must know something clearly, but that to me is the most exciting part of this deal is the fact that it wasn't just draft pick compensation. You got an actual B level type prospect with room to grow. Now let's move over to the forwards. Will Cuylle is signed to a 2-year contract extension worth $3.9 million per season. And, there was a lot of talk that he could be offer sheeted, and same with Keandre Miller. And Keandre Miller, I guess, in essence, sort of was, but, it ends up being like an actual trade with Carolina. Cuylle, the Rangers value him a lot. He's a big part of the future for this team. He is really absolutely in that top 6. It's not even a question. We're going to talk about the forward situation in a moment, but Cuylle is coming off an 82-game season, 20 goals, 25 assists, 45 points, and a +12 on a Ranger team that did not do very well. And Will Cuylle did not do a whole lot on the power play. This is mostly even strength numbers. There is some shorthanded stuff mixed in as well. But Cuylle, this seems like someone that has a really bright future. Now, will he be a star? I don't know, right? I'm not sure. But a 2020 pick from the Rangers, and 2020, look back at that draft, that was one of the better ones by the Rangers. That was actually the last one done by Jeff Gordon. And we know 2017 to 2019 was disastrous, honestly, really the whole way through. Not a whole lot of good came from that. But 2020, Will Cuylle, who they basically acquired for Elias Anderson. Like the fact that Elias Anderson turned to Will Cuylle is a very fortunate turn of events. And he's a big body. Like I like his attitude. This guy, he wants to win. He's different than a lot of the other Rangers. He is. And I think now with Chris Kreider being traded, Cooley has an opportunity to really make his mark. And it's a 2-year deal, which will lead him into just restricted free agency. And so then we'll see what they do from there. And then a couple years from there is unrestricted free agency. But hopefully the Rangers are in a position where next time around, a couple years from now, they're able to give him that longer term deal, that 5-year type contract that he deserves. But a lot of work to be done, but very glad that it worked out with Will Cuylle and that somehow he wasn't snagged away from them. And for what it's worth, the cap hit is extremely fair. I mean, he really could have earned a lot more than that. So 2 years, $3.9 million. Then you have a very minor signing that we'll talk about, extremely minor. It was a 2-year contract to Justin Dowling, who last year played for the New Jersey Devils. The Dowling deal, 2 years, $775,000 for the next couple of seasons. We'll see where he ends up. I wouldn't be shocked if it's Hartford, but for now, you have to take it somewhat seriously that maybe he makes the team. Played 52 games for the Devils last season, actually played all 5 games. Devils were pretty hurt, so that's part of it. Versus Carolina, Dowling played each of those 5 games. He's been a journeyman. He was in the Stars organization for a while, then Vancouver, and then New Jersey. Has never really put up any sort of numbers. Nothing really to talk about here, honestly. He's a center that, look, like we'll see. There's a chance just because, look, he was on a playoff team last year and played a lot, but that could just speak to the Devils just choosing to use him for whatever the reason. Again, you look at this, I'm not overly impressive, but also this is a minimum contract. This is a nothing contract that really doesn't serve much consequence, but wanted to at least acknowledge it. And we'll see, if he does make the team. So with the forwards, just to kind of end it, the top 6 is very defined, assuming Mika Zibanejad plays at right wing, which seems like it's the plan. But the Rangers, I think for the little money they have left, I think they probably may want to invest in a third liner, preferably a center if at all possible. Because the top 6 is going to include Panarin, and this is no order, right? Just 6 players. Panarin, Zibanejad, JT Miller, Lafreniere, Trocheck, and Will Cuylle. You kind of know your fourth line is going to be, some form of Carrick centering Edstrom and Rempe. So that leaves you with 4 other players. That leaves you, and not including Justin Dowling. And also Arthur Kaliev is now going to be a free agent because they didn't qualify him either, which I also mentioned in the short yesterday with Zach Jones. Third line right now is like Parsonen centering Othman and Berard. There's no way that's actually going to be what it is. And Brodzinski being kind of that one that moves around the lineup. So, Brodzinski, he probably will play. He actually had a decent season last year, all things considered. And Parsonen really, that's a big question mark. I think that clearly the coaching staff didn't like him last year. I guess Drury does. The fact that they gave him a 2-year deal worth $1.25 million. I think they see something in him, but that's the big question for me. The defense has holes. I don't know if anything is going to change as far as what we see. That might be set, barring a Carson Soucy trade, but I don't know if they'll do that. It's the forwards, though, that third line, unless you move Zibanejad to center, which can then, in theory, open up a spot for, again, you don't feel great about it, for an Othman or a Berard if they somehow had a really good training camp. But even then, I think that with the little cap space they have, they have to maybe try to get a veteran third liner that is legitimately going to be in the lineup. As much as I love for Othman and Berard and the young players, I'm not even including Gabe Perreault. I think Gabe Perreault, he would have to have an amazing training camp to make the team. It's pretty unlikely. I think he'll be in Hartford. So that is something that I look at that and it's whoa. Fourth line I like. Top 6, if it stays healthy, is pretty good, I guess. And Zibanejad, there is a world where he does go back to center, and that kind of changes the paradigm completely. But I think that's one thing to look at in the coming days here is they may try to bring in someone like an actual, not a Justin Dowling, an actual NHL forward to round out, kind of that top 9, if you will. So a busy, busy day for the New York Rangers and Chris Drury. And I really think that it was a pretty good one. And there's always two sides to it. I could certainly see people not being pleased with the idea that they brought in Gavrikov, considering it is a 7-year deal for someone that is 29 years old. So I get that, and there were Ranger fans that really liked Keandre Miller, and so like it's not you never know, but I think the Drury did as good as he could. And what's an important year for Chris Drury. Look, I think a bad season here, and this could be the last off season that he has. So we'll see. But free agent frenzy, day one comes to an end, and the New York Rangers were certainly busy, and we'll see what's to come. But we have a much better picture of what this opening night roster will look like this coming season.